Hello, fellow plant scientists. How are you guys doing today? If you're new around here, my name's Ashley and I'm a soil scientist with a plant science minor. And on this channel, I like to take those sciences, put them together, and produce you guys videos for both your houseplants but also your outdoor gardens. So if you like the sounds of that, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below, give this video a thumbs up, and let me know if you've ever experienced root rot before and how you treated it and what worked for you and what didn't, because this is all about collaboration and community and working together to share ideas. So today has been a very highly requested video from a plethora of different people from all over the world, from the Philippines to right here in North America. I have gotten DMs on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, you name it, asking for an entire video on root rot. And so here today I present to you the root rot video, and it's gonna be long. I have a very funny feeling it's going to be long. I literally typed out pages for the script on this and did a ton of research and just kind of piled all my ideas in. So if you are trying to just get to the root of the video, I will leave a timestamp section below. You can just click on that if you want to just get to the treatment side, the recommendation, whatever. But on this channel, I do like to get into the plant science, the soil science side, because that's literally the purpose of the channel. So I will be going thoroughly through everything, and we're going to start off with what exactly causes root rot. And this one I think is going to surprise a lot of people because there's actually two reasons that root rot happens. It's not just overwatering. Overwatering really isn't the cause. But then we're going to also be getting into treatments and how to properly treat this, signs and symptoms, actual signs and symptoms of root rot, not what the internet says and hokey pokey, actual science to what it looks like and how to identify it, how it differs from bugs and other issues that your plant may have, and then recommendations on how to prevent it. So I'm excited for this video. This is right up my alley. Let's get into it. Two reasons why root rot happens. The first one is really going to surprise you, and it's actually pathogens. So there is actual pathogens that cause root rot, and one of the most common ones that people will note is Fusarium wilt. And if you've heard of that before, it's because it's very common in legume crops, and it's actually a huge detriment to agriculture, food production. So that one is very common, and it's kind of known all over the world. It happens everywhere we can speak of, but there are other versions of pathogens that also cause this, and they are essentially all Phytophthora. And I probably screwed that up. Never been possessed before, not great at Latin, so I apologize. But Phytophthora. And then under that, there's obviously different species of those pathogens. And some of the most common ones that cause this are Sinomyonia and Phythium and Rhizotomiae. Anyways, doesn't matter. Essentially what they are is fungi, and they come from spores. These spores then erupt and they just kind of start a cycle. That cycle resides in the soil but can also reside on the roots themselves of the plant. So what does this mean for someone who's a plant parent or a plant house person? This means that your soil can be contaminated, but also your containers, both nursery pots and the cover pots you put them in. So if you are having continual root rot and you're thinking to yourself, there is no way I am overwatering these plants, I know I'm not, because I'm letting them dry out fully and I keep on getting root rot. What it may be is an actual pathogen, and that pathogen can reside in the soil. So you may need to start off with completely fresh, sterile soil, but it also may reside in the roots. So you may have to chop back all the roots, or at a very minimum, sterilize the roots. And then the third being the nursery pot, but also the cover pot itself. These spores can reside in there. So I do suggest either popping those in the dishwasher or putting them in a light bleach solution. Now, for the cover pot side and for the decorative pot side, if you have a cement pot, a terracotta pot, or any pot that has any sort of groove or scratching on it just from age, wear, and tear, these ones are going to be a lot harder to clean. So I suggest letting them actually soak in a bleach solution rather than popping them in the dishwasher, just because spores literally they are notorious for living decades and very tight knit corners. So that is my suggestion to try to alleviate the pathogen side. But that is something that I feel like no one ever talks about, but is completely valid and a very real thing. So now let's get into the second reason, which you already know what it is, but from a soil scientist, plant science perspective on exactly what waterlogged means. It's not as simple as just overwatering. There's actually quite a bit that goes into this. So I wrote notes out so I didn't forget a single thing about what I wanted to say about the whole waterlog overwatering scenario and root rot. So if the cuts and the editing seem a little bit choppy and weird, it's literally because I'm just looking at my notes to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. So I apologize. So essentially, the way that I think of it is overwatering is caused by underutilized water. And what I mean by that is that you may have a schedule for watering. And I hate the word schedule because schedule and plants, they don't mix. And they especially don't mix in a houseplant scenario in a cold climate. I'm in a zone 3, I'm in Canada. It just, schedule, plant, that's not a thing. And the reason why is because waterlogged and overwatered soil is more so an indication of lack of productivity above ground, whether that be from lack of light, lack of fertilizer, too much fertilizer, or just not the right growing conditions in general. Even dormancy can cause this. So if the plant changes or pivots in what it's doing, what it wants to do, which is especially going to happen now, I know there's a lot of new plant parents out there, and I know there's a lot of people that are just getting into the world of houseplants, and I am going to just hazard a guess that this is going to become a very common problem. And the reason why it's going to become a very common problem is because plants are going to start going dormant and they're not going to start growing as vivaciously as they have been all summer long. The days are getting shorter, the light is decreasing, the warmth is decreasing, the humidity is plummeting, especially if you're in a cold climate. And so therefore your plants aren't going to be utilizing as much water. So the water scheduling that you were using before is not going to work for the winter. So we're ending up into an equation where our water usage is not equaling the amount we're putting in. What happens when we overwater? Well, essentially we're causing an anaerobic environment. Anaerobic means lack of oxygen. The reason this happens is because soil has something called soil porosity. I've talked about that in my soil science series, and essentially what it means is that we need equal parts air, water, and soil. And once we have equal parts, we have awesome growth. But if we fill up those soil pores with a ton of water with zero air, what ends up happening is we essentially choke our plants out. And by choking the plants out, what I actually mean is that we're choking out the bacteria, the fungi, all the beneficial goodness that's in the soil. Because our roots of our plant share its environment with microorganisms that we cannot see, those microorganisms need oxygen. If they don't have oxygen, or they don't have the amount of oxygen that they're used to, the bacterial and the fungal colonies begin to die off. Once the bacterial colonies and fungal colonies begin to die off because of lack of oxygen in the soil pores, we end up with root rot, which is essentially caused by acidic mass death in your soil, for lack of a better term. This is why when you water propagate, you don't overwater. This is also why if you put a plant in an aquarium, you don't overwater. In the simplest of terms, you don't end up with that acidic die-off of both bacteria and fungi. So root rot isn't actually your roots rotting right away. It's actually your bacterial colonies, fungal colonies dying off due to lack of oxygen in our soil pores, which then cause an acidic environment, and that acidic environment obviously eventually will eat away at the root kind of cap, outer areas, dead cells, and move its way in. It's in a toxic environment that essentially just disintegrates your roots. So the most deadly part of the mass little extinction happening in your pot is actually makes methane gas, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a gas. And the best way to know if you have root rot or you have something else is actually when you lift the pot out and you kind of make like a hole, or you lift the plant out and you kind of open the soil up, or you can just literally lift the pot out and sniff the bottom. I know that sounds weird, and I've smelt soil before on a lot of my other videos, and it's just something that soil scientists do. I can't tell you why, but just in the comments below if you know what I'm talking about. Anyways, you can smell methane gas. You can smell that rotting scent, and that right away is going to tell you that you've had a little mass extinction inside your pot, and it's time to pivot and change. If it smells, do not wait for the plant to utilize that water, because it's already too late. If the soil is stinking, it's time to get in there and transplant. Well, let's get into the signs and symptoms of root rot and kind of the best way to take care of it. So let's start with the above ground portion and what to look for, and then we'll kind of just move our way down the plant. As root rot is exactly that, it's the rotting of our roots. What we need to look at, or what we need to look for signs of, is actually signs of lack of nutrients or lack of water or moisture stress. Those are going to be our two signifiers as to what's going on. So I'll tell you how, I promise. It's going to depend on the type of plant you have as to what you're going to see first. So I have a list of plants that, in my experience, what signals they will give you first, depending on what plant it is. And this is for the houseplant side. For an outdoor plant scenario, you are 100% going to see a nutrient deficiency before you see a watering issue. That's just hands down, doesn't matter what it is, that is what you are going to see. The exception to this is vining plants, tomatoes, pumpkins, things like that. You are going to notice a water stress scenario first, which is just the drooping of the leaves and just kind of like a floppy look. That's going to signify your root rot in the vining section. But for tomatoes, peppers, all that stuff, you're going to notice a nutrient deficiency before you're going to notice a water stress issue. Usually. Let's pull up my handy dandy laptop. So, Calathea, Alocasia, Colocasia, Spathiphyllums, peace lilies, are all going to show water stress because they're about the drama. They're all about the drama. So they're going to show you in the sign of water stress. And I'm going to actually just grab one of my my Velvet Elvis that had root rot when I bought it. I actually bought it on sale. I'm a bargain hunter when it comes to plants. So so this is my root rot Velvet Elvis. We're still in the midst of a battle. So what I've done is I put it in a terracotta pot because more aeration, more airflow. And then inside the pot, I've got quite a few new nodes of growth. We've got one here, got one down there, and we have some others kind of on this side. But as you can see, mama plant here is very sick looking, and that's because she has root rot, or she did have root rot. So what I did, my first sign that there was an issue was actually this drooping. So see kind of this blip look? That was my first sign. There was no color change. This color change you're seeing here is completely new. So my initial sign was kind of this limp looking top leaf. That is how I knew my Velvet Elvis was in trouble, and why he was also on sale. And so that is kind of where I'm at with this. I'm assuming I'm going to lose this leaf, which is fine because I got lots of new growth on my corm. That's all I need. I can bring it back. Trust me. I'm a miracle worker. So Mr. Velvet Elvis here, his first sign was kind of this drooping cap on top, and that is very indicative of a root rot scenario. My second test was actually digging away at the corm side of it and giving it a sniff, and it smelled rotten. So right then and there, I knew what I was battling right from the get-go. So that is what happened. But you will also notice now, after time, it's been probably 2 weeks, 3 weeks that I've been battling with this plant on it, and finally I'm starting to see something happy out of it, which is that stuff down below. But you can see this fading color here on both that main vein and then also on the edges, and that is starting to show my signs of my nutrient deficiency that I have. And my nutrient deficiency is completely caused by the fact that I don't have any roots to take any of my nutrition up. So that is one of my drama plants, and that is exactly what it's going to look like. It's just going to look limp. Second set of plants, second grouping of plants is going to be Monstera, Pothos, Aroids, and Hoyas. So this one's a little bit different. They may wilt, probably won't, may wilt though, but most likely you are going to start seeing yellow leaves. And this yellowing of leaves is specifically going to show up on the older leaves. The reason for the older leaves being the first ones to have this happen is because we're looking at a nitrogen deficiency, and those plants are very dependent on nitrogen because they are all foliage and green and happy. And once we impede our nitrogen flow, we right away start seeing the signs of it. We are going to see lack of nitrogen before we see any sort of drooping in the leaves, typically. Now, the other one that we may see is a turning yellow, either on the edges or within the margins between the veins. And this is essentially something called chlorosis, which is an iron deficiency. Again, very important nutrient to a plant, but it's going to kind of ring the alarm bells for us to let us know that something's happening with our roots. This is very common in an outdoor scenario. When there's lots of rain, you will typically see this. In an indoor scenario, it is going to be because you've got a waterlogged soil or something like that. So I'm probably popping photos up this whole time while I'm editing. I always do try to find the best I can, the most scientifically accurate, but that chlorosis look is kind of this, this yellowing on the rims here. So that, again, it's showing me that there's a nutrient deficiency. I can see my veins are a totally different color than any of my other plants, and I'm not struggling with this in any of my other plants right now. I'm gonna just grab my Rhaphidophora and I want to show you guys that one. This is my Rhaphidophora tetrasperma. What you're seeing is very happy and healthy looking, and that's because that's not what I got from the breeder that I got this from, or the greenhouse that I got this from. I can't really lift him up very high because he's on a stake, but you can see he's very happy and healthy on his new leaves. He does not have root rot. I want to show you what is a misconception for root rot. So typically in greenhouses, in my experience, when I've worked in a greenhouse, what a lot of greenhouses will do is they'll actually have fertilizer plumbed into their watering system. So they're constantly fertilizing on a regular basis. Nothing wrong with this method, except for when you have plants who are slightly sensitive to salts, and then you're going to end up with, okay, you can see Bronx in the background. So when a company or a greenhouse or a nursery is fertilizing or pumping water into their fertilizer into their watering systems, you're going to end up with these brown tips. This is simply salt that has happened here. It's been exposed to a lot of salt, and this can actually happen in a scenario where someone has tap water that has a high salt concentration, not chlorine. Chlorine does not, well, I shouldn't say that. Chlorine does cause this, but that's not the only reason that this happens. It can happen with any salt in your soil. This is also a sign of over-fertilization. So that's what that is. That is not root rot at all. But another misconception, it's actually this, which is not a disease. It's not root rot. It's actually sunburn. So what happened here is my plant got a little bit too close to an LED light that is very powerful. And as you guys know, Rhaptophora tetraspermas, they don't really like a ton of sunlight. So I burnt the ever-living piss out of these leaves, and yeah, now it's its life. But as you can see, my new leaves coming in are very pretty, very happy, and this guy is a new guy to my collection, and I'm in love with him. But yeah, so that's essentially what that looks like. My new leaves are coming in great. This is not a root rot scenario, but I just want to show you what some people label as root rot that is not. The last category or group is going to be succulents, cacti, and the Sansaveria mother-in-law's tongue snake plant, which technically is a Dracaena now. So that is going to turn color. Now that color can vary. It's usually yellow, but sometimes it can go white or pale gray, and then it's just going to go to mush. So I actually just grabbed one of my Sanseverias, and I definitely have root rot on one. I know why. I definitely overwatered him. Yeah, it's big. He's very old. How tall is he? He's probably like 3-4 feet tall. Okay, so you can see this. This is a very mushy yellow leaf, and that is root rot. And I already know that I overwatered him the one time. So yeah, that's what that is. I actually filled up his cover pot, and I didn't dump the water out of the cover pot. What can I say? We all make mistakes. Okay, so that is our signs of root rot on the upper portions. When it comes to the lower portions, you are going to have the smell, and you're typically going to have non-white roots / kind of mushy brown roots. So if you have mushy, smelly brown roots, then that means you have root rot. Roots should always be white. The exception is the mother-in-law's tongue, snake plant, Sansaveria, whatever you want to call it. Those have actually orange roots, like bright orange roots. So that is the only exception, but for the most part, they should be white or some sort of pale gray, orange in the case of this plant, but not brown, not black, not mushy, and they shouldn't be hollow. Orchid roots go hollow. They should not be hollow. They should be very firm. So now let's get into the treatment of root rot and exactly what we can do. My first recommendation is always throw the soil out and reuse new fresh soil. So don't reuse your soil, try to get some fresh stuff, especially if you think it's a pathogen, but regardless, you shouldn't just be reusing the old soil that you just got rid of. The reason being it's very acidic. The bacterial colonies are pretty much decimated. Remember your mass extinction you caused. It's smelly, it's gross. Just if you want to reuse it, fine, but reuse it in an outdoor setting. Please do not put it back into your indoor plant collection, especially, or try to sterilize it either by heating it up, which I'm not recommending because you're probably going to light it on fire. It's not a fail-safe way of doing it because it's organic material, large surface area, very hard to do. I said this already, bleach all your nursery pots, but also your decorative pots, run them through the dishwasher, I don't care, sterilize them. Your third step is going to trim off anything that's damaged, squishy, rotten, smells bad. Gotta go, gotta trim them off, take a clean pair of scissors that you've sterilized with some rubbing alcohol and get down to it. The fourth, are we on number four? Fourth one you're gonna wanna try is hydrogen peroxide. Do a 50% hydrogen peroxide, 50% water, and just simply let your plant roots sit in that mixture while you're prepping and fixing everything up after you've cut your dead roots off. It doesn't have to be a long period of time. It can be 10-15 minutes. That's all it needs. Do not. I've seen this before and it makes me cringe. From a soil scientist perspective, it makes me cringe. Do not put a hydrogen peroxide in your soil. The reason being is because hydrogen peroxide does sterilize. It definitely gets rid of bacteria, fungi, all that stuff, but it's also going to get rid of your beneficial fungi and bacteria, both of which are very important. If you are buying if you're buying a pro-mix soil that has the mycoactive mycorrhizae formula in it, the Growtopia stuff, I actually have a bag right in front of me, but you are just decimating all your rhizobacteria and stuff, which is actually very important for both fungal, it's fungal hyphae that crawls into the soil and basically helps with uptake of nutrients and water. So please do not hydrogen peroxide your soilless or your soil mediums, because you're killing off everything. You're killing off the bad, yes, but you're also killing off the good. And I can promise you this, plants need those microbes just as much as they need soil nutrients. So please do not hydrogen peroxide your soil. That is a bad idea. Another option is you can actually sprinkle some cinnamon on your roots, and all this is going to do is act as an antifungal and just kind of give it an extra layer of protection. And then lastly, you can just use a broad spectrum fungicide on your roots, especially if you think it is a pathogen. So these can range in a bunch of different forms, from methobromide to chloroprysin. You can buy these at any kind of greenhouse, host store, or whatever. I'm not going to name any names as to which formula is best. I've never used them. I usually just manually deal with my root rot. I've never had a pathogen issue, but that is an option if you think that that may be your case. So my recommendations on preventing this and making sure that this doesn't happen, obviously the obvious ones that everyone talks about, but I want to give you some actual useful tips that I do use personally that aren't just the fluffy ones that people usually give. So the first one being clear pots. And I'm a huge fan of clear nursery pots because mine's not so clear anymore because it's very old. But the reason being is because I can see my root growth. I can see how happy and healthy my roots are. I can see my color of my roots. And I can actually see my water level and the amount of moisture that's in this container, because this will light it up. So these are really cheap. This big, huge one that this plant has been living in for ages was only $2. So you can get them a whole bunch of different sizes, and I heavily recommend them. They are my go-to choice for pretty much any plant for that reason. I can check my moisture levels. I can see the humidity on the outside of the package. I can see the color of my roots. I can see the plumpness of my roots. I can see if it's root bound or if it's too big of a pot. I can see everything. It's a little magnifying glass for me. So that is my first recommendation. Clear pots are the way to go for the nursery pots. And then I just put this in a decorative pot, so you can't even tell that it's an ugly clear one. The second recommendation is bleach all your pots, regardless of what's been in them, if it had root rot or not. Just make sure you sterilize between use. Bleach is the method that I use. Pop them in the sink with a bit of bleach. I don't even know how much I put in. Doesn't matter. And then just sterilize them that way, let them dry off, and they are good for planting. The other tip is actually fluffing the soil. So if you notice that your water to usage ratio is off, and you maybe miss some signals that the plant is going dormant or slowing down, and you're a little bit worried about it, simply just take a fork and literally fluff the soil and just the outer surface. What that's going to do is it's actually going to allow for more air exchange between the soil pores and the actual soil medium, which is then going to eventually dry it out a bit quicker. So forks and fluffing are the way to go. You're probably thinking, well, I'm going to hurt my root system. You're going to hurt your root system regardless if you're in that zone. So fork fluffing is number one. If you are an overwaterer, skip the whole nursery pot inside a decorative pot thing, and I recommend you just start off with terracotta pots. You have to water, depending on where you are, you're gonna have to water 2 to 3 times more often in a terracotta pot than a nursery pot inside a terracotta pot. So it is labor intensive. I do not use terracotta pots often unless I am in the midst of battling a root rot scenario. Then I will use a terracotta or a cement, something that is porous. The reason being is because I want to monitor my water usage, and I want a quick, effective way to alter it. So this is what I'm doing here for this guy, and I do that with all my root rot cases, but for the most part, I don't do it because it is very labor intensive. You will be watering much, much more often. My other tip is actually mixing in wood chunks, so wood chips like that orchid bark bag behind me, leca So the hydroponic balls, I know that sounds crazy, but I actually do put those in my soil because both of those actually help provide aeration, give a bit of oxygen to the bacteria that is in there, helps, you know, keep those colonies alive, keep that soil healthy. But I also, people are gonna laugh at me and I'm cool with that. That's sunburn, that's nothing. I put pool noodles in my container so you can see all my pool noodles. And the reason for that is because they provide a lot of aeration. And you can see my roots really like congregating around those areas. They're not dead spots, and the roots will over time actually penetrate through those areas, and they're just kind of like a safe zone. So all I do is I literally go to the dollar store, take a pool noodle, and I kind of cut it in the center. You're gonna want to put your pool noodles towards the bottom of your pot, not to the upper layers, because if you put it too far up, they tend to float. Fancy that. But yeah, so put them farther down and then put the soil on top, and then just kind of compact the soil down on top of that. And that is a great way to provide aeration and space for your plant to breathe. And my last recommendation for prevention is probably going to really blow your mind, but it's actually don't let your plant dry out too much. And the reason for this is when we let our plants really dry out, yes, you're going to prevent root rot to a point, but once you rewater, your plant generally has probably gone into a dormant state and pivoted and changed into more of a water conserving state, and therefore it's shut its guard cells, it's slammed closed its stomata, it's really decreased on respiration and just kind of, you know, water exchange. Photosynthesis has gone down, and just water usage in general has started to kind of collapse. And what happens when you water a plant at that stage is, depending on the type of plant you have and how far into almost a dormancy state you've sent it, it may take a long time for the plant, you know, the factory to start running again once it's been signaled that there is water present. And so what will happen is, because there's an underutilization of the water, your bacteria, your fungi will die, which will rot, which will cause the methane gas and the acidic environment, which will then rot your roots. The only thing that this does not happen to is succulents, lithops, cacti, mother-in-law's tongues, and just anything in that, you know, in that desert kind of climate range, desert rose, for example, stuff like that. Those are the only ones that will not happen to. And the reason that it doesn't happen to them is because their root systems are completely designed differently. They're designed to really, once the water hits, they take it up right away, right now, right here. So that is why they are a little bit different. But other plants, they will, you know, pivot and change, and their roots may not be able to react fast enough, especially if we've really calloused and layered up on the dead cells on the actual root itself. Okay, so this video is like enormously long. I just looked at the timer. I have to apologize, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you found it helpful. If there's something I missed, questions you have, please put them in the comments. I answer all my comments no matter what. So I promise I will answer them. If you are invested in this channel and you enjoy it, be sure to hit that subscribe button. But also, merch alert. Is that a thing? I'm selling merch now. Kind of crazy. My friend Cheryl actually made a design for me. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, but you can grab some of that merch in the description below if you want to. Mine isn't in yet, so I don't want to like really talk about it too much, but I just want to let you guys know that yay, we have some, yay. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.